Good evening, everybody. I'm here to talk to you tonight about my vision and my belief in education for not only students to survive the contemporary world, but also to thrive. And it is my fundamental belief that grades don't matter, well-being and life skills do. Now, to tell you to give you a background as to how I came to this conclusion, it's important for you to know how my journey in education started. I trained to be a teacher in 2011 in the UK, and I went straight immediately into working for an inner city school, state comprehensive, a very large school. And it became clear to me very quickly that in order to be deemed a good teacher, my students had to get good grades. And I was lucky. I was one of the very few that was often deemed good, or if not outstanding. And it was because my students got good grades. And I really thought that I had cracked the nail, sort of hit the nail on the head. I'd discovered the secret to being a fantastic teacher. I thought I knew what education was all about. 9 years later, in 2020, here we are. And I can't tell you how much or how wrong my thinking was back then, how flawed it was. And in these last 9 years, I've learned more than what I had during my entire career in school as a student myself. In these 9 years, my belief and my ideology of education has changed. But the students I see in front of me year in, year out, they haven't. In fact, if anything, I would say they are more obsessed with getting good grades. Now, I really had to ask myself, well, where does this stem from and why are young people like this? And it turned out that I was also like this as a student myself. And I had to take myself back into my childhood to understand why. You see, my parents were immigrants to the UK, and neither of them had studied in higher education. They worked multiple jobs and long hours. And so from a real young age, they made it clear to us that if we didn't want to struggle and have the same strifes as them, we'd need to study, we'd need to get good grades, we'd need to work hard, we'd need to go to university to get better jobs. But I only represent a small proportion of the population. And I've really tried over the years to understand from my students why they feel that getting good grades will guarantee them the success in life. And I've had a range of reasons, going from, well, it'll be a disappointment to my parents, right the way through to, well, my next door neighbor went to a really good university, so I have to too. And underpinning all of these reasons was one belief, and it's this hardwired belief as a species that I feel we have developed in that good grades are going to get us a successful future. Now, I'm not here to tell you that that's not the case, because it is, and for most of us it is. If I look at my lifestyle now, I'm certainly more comfortable than that of my parents. But did that education really prepare me for the life that I was about to live? Did it really prepare me for the career that I was about to embark on? And if you ask me that, quite simply, no. And looking at research and statistics, it's become clear that this isn't the case for everyone. In Canada alone, underemployment of graduates who have studied hard, gone to university, graduated, is sitting at 35%. In Australia, at 26%. And in the UK, 38% of graduates are recorded as not working in full-time employment after 6 months of graduating. So for those that really believe that getting good grades and working hard and making all that effort is going to guarantee them a successful life, well, that's not quite the case. Furthermore, a global study was conducted, and it was found that almost half of graduates felt that, in fact, their education didn't, in fact, prepare them for the career that they were about to lead. or the life that they were about to live. Now, I know I'm giving you a lot of statistics here, but I've got one more that's really important to make the point that I'm making. And that is, we will, on average, as modern 21st century citizens, change career between 5 and 7 times throughout our life. So if you think about it, this notion of coming to school to learn and acquire academic knowledge, yes, is very important, but to have the fundamental belief that getting good grades is going to guarantee us success, it doesn't quite fit. Now, I want to turn my attention to well-being. Where does this fit in with well-being? Well, it's no secret that, in fact, the pressure that our young students and young people feel in today's day is more than ever before. The pressures that are on them are more than the pressures that were on myself and more than the pressures that were on the generation before us. Academically, students are studying more than what they ever have before. And non-academically, in an extracurricular capacity, they are engaging with more things than they ever have. And we're not just talking about sports and music or arts. We're talking about the LGBTQ movement. We're talking about climate change. The pressures on students is rising. And it's so high that ultimately it's going to impact their well-being. Now, the World Health Organization, they stated, and after doing some extensive research, that half of all mental health issues start at the age of 14. And almost all of them, all of these cases will often go untreated and undetected. And they'll come later on in life, resurface as bigger problems. Not only that, they identified that globally, depression is one of the leading causes of illnesses in adolescence, where suicide was the third leading cause of death in 15 to 19-year-olds. So if you put the two things together, we've got this increasing demand and pressure on young children, on young people. We have this increasing demand to get good grades, to go on to good institutions, to get good careers and success out of it. And then on the other hand, we seem to be compromising our well-being. And it just doesn't quite work. And year in, year out, as my time in teaching has progressed, and as I've gained experience and as I've learned, I've realized that this is becoming the forefront, a forefrontal issue in our education policy making. We need to be looking at students' well-being, because there's no point in trying to get good grades or trying to achieve success when the one thing that's going to hold you back is your own personal well-being. And therefore, I have very slowly evolved my view of teaching and education. And I fundamentally believe that schools should be seen as mentorship and support systems, and not givers of knowledge of all kind. The online learning platform is growing so increasingly growing so quickly that it's easily accessible for anybody to access any information. In fact, if I tell my students to find out what radiation is, they can pretty much do that within 5 minutes of looking on a laptop and searching on the internet. I don't really need to impart that information to them anymore. What I need to be doing is building their skills, their confidence, learning who they are personally and individually, and making sure that I don't do a one-size-fits-all, because a one-size-fits-all doesn't work in this 21st century. We should be enriching well-being and life skills, and we should be providing safe spaces for our young students to talk and explore difficult topics. But most importantly, we should be developing that self-efficacy, confidence, and self-belief. Now, as an educator, I know that I'm not the only one beginning to think this way. Research tells us that a growing number of teachers and educators across the globe have identified that online learning will eventually become the new norm. Some even believe that schools will begin to exist only online. A lot of people, educators and young people themselves, are starting to question the cost of higher education versus the gains that they will make out of it. Is it worth all that debt when I know that I'm not necessarily going to get a high-paying job at the end of it? And this soft skills decline is now being recognized as highly important. In this research that I looked at, it was recorded that over 80% of employers had stated that grades, or even to some extent degrees, really didn't matter to them. What mattered was what that person had to offer. What skills were they coming with to that workplace? Could that candidate sit in a meeting or in a conference and communicate clearly and effectively? Could they build intrapersonal and interpersonal skills? Could they have the knowledge of emotional intelligence in order to be successful and work with many different people? And it's these soft skills that I'm referring to as these life skills, and developing and enriching those. And the fourth key strand that I put here was that alternative routes through education are no longer being considered as alternatives, because surely there can't only be one path to success, and that one path can't be relying on good grades. As a result, I changed my approach to teaching. Where possible, I engage with the students and I talk to them. Today was an example. This afternoon, my students came into my room and they said that they were exhausted. I asked them why. I gave them that space to talk. They were talking about their projects and their essays and things that they had going on. I asked them questions. We talked a little more. We related it back to the chemistry that they were learning. And at the end of the lesson, they said, "You know what? We feel so much better for having that space to talk. Could we do that once a week?" And then I told them that I had, not purposely, but I had engaged that talk for a little longer than what I would have liked, given that I was doing this talk tonight. And it just reaffirmed and gave me that more confidence and more affirmation to be able to stand here and say to you that I know that this works. The truth of the matter is that very same class, I told them that I wanted them to research some topics for the next lesson. And I know that they will come to that lesson with the knowledge of those topics. I no longer have to teach them those. I just have to mentor them and support them in developing, in becoming the people they want to be. And thus, in conclusion to my talk tonight, I just want to really reiterate here that learning is lifelong. We should never encourage our children or say to our children that they're coming to school to get good grades, to graduate and get a degree, and that's it. Research shows us that that's not the case. We engage in lifelong learning now. It's not about what we learn or how well we did in it. It's about what we did and how we're going to apply it. It's about the process. And I fundamentally believe that moving forward. It's my vision in a faraway dream in the future that one day universities and higher education institutions won't just take our young people on grades or on a personal statement. They will take them based on their attributes and for them as an individual and what they can offer. Because we're all individual and each of one of our paths are all very unique. There's no saying that what one person will do now that another person can't do in 5 years' time. And therefore, we should reinvent and rethink our ideas and our ideologies of education too. Thank you for listening.